Back in 2013, a Hollywood movie hit theaters. It was about a stockbroker who ripped off thousands of people. He blew their money on yachts, on mansions, on parties that ran for days. The movie was called The Wolf of Wall Street. And here's what nobody sitting in those theaters realized. According to the US Department of Justice, a big chunk of the money that paid for that film came out of a national investment fund. The fund belonged to Malaysia. It was set up to build power plants, hospitals, roads for 30 million people. This is the story of $4.5 billion that just vanished. And it's the story of one man who was standing right in the middle of all of it. A man who never once held an official job title, no employment contract, no business card, no name anywhere on the org chart. And that, it turns out, is exactly why it worked. Let's go back to the start. 1981. A boy is born in Penang, Malaysia. Comfortable family, but not rich. He gets sent off to England, to one of the most exclusive boarding schools in the country. His classmates, the sons of royal families from the Middle East and Southeast Asia. Now stop and sit with that for a second, because this one detail explains everything that comes later. That boy didn't learn how to make money. He learned how to stand next to people who already had it. Then came Wharton, one of the top business schools in America. He graduates in 2005, and he comes home with a degree, a list of phone numbers, and, honestly, not much else. A few years later, that same young man starts putting deals together. He connects investors in the Middle East with businesses in Malaysia. And the way he worked, according to people who actually dealt with him, was always the same trick. To the Malaysians, he was the guy who represented Middle Eastern money. To the people in the Middle East, he was the guy with a direct line to Malaysia's leadership, and neither side ever picked up the phone to check with the other. He flew private to his meetings. He booked the most expensive restaurants in town. He threw the kind of parties that made sure everyone in finance remembered his face. Here's the thing though, at this point, he barely owned anything. He was buying something else entirely. He was buying the look of a man who already had it all. And in the world of finance, that look opens a shocking number of doors. April 2009. Najib Razak becomes Prime Minister of Malaysia. 3 months later, a national investment fund is born. The full name is One Malaysia Development Berhad, but everyone just calls it 1MDB. The Prime Minister signs on as senior advisor, and under the fund's own rules, every major financial decision needs his signature. As for the man from Penang, he holds no position at all, not a director, not an appointed advisor, not even an employee. But years later, in court, the fund's former chief executive testifies that this man was the one calling the shots on the projects. On the Prime Minister's behalf, the fund's former chairman testifies that he was the go-between, linking the board straight to the Prime Minister. And in 2025, the judge in the case rules that he acted as the Prime Minister's proxy, his conduit, his agent. This man, to this day, denies all of it. September 2009, the fund's very first big deal, $1 billion poured into a joint venture with a Middle Eastern oil company. On paper, it's an energy investment. In reality, investigators would later find that most of that money never reached the oil company at all. It landed in the account of a completely different company, registered offshore, controlled by the man with no job title. Now do the math with me here. The fund was created in July. The first money went missing in September. Less than 3 months. There was no honest stretch that went bad somewhere down the line. It was rotten from the very first deal. 2010. The name starts showing up in American gossip columns. A young Asian businessman ordering dozens of bottles in a single night at a New York nightclub. Parties that go till sunrise. Famous faces everywhere. The American press calls him the mystery playboy from Asia. And nobody can figure out where his money is coming from. In New York, nobody asks. In Malaysia, nobody notices. 2012. The fund raises another $6.5 billion in international bonds across 3 separate rounds. The bank arranging it all is Goldman Sachs, one of the most prestigious investment banks on the planet. And the fees the bank walks away with? Somewhere around $600 million. Now, if you work in finance, that's the number that stops you cold. On a normal government bond deal, the arranging fee is a tiny sliver of 1%. Here, it was many, many times that. So, how many layers of internal approval did a number like that sail through inside one of the biggest banks on earth? Nobody stopped it. So, where did all the money actually go? According to Department of Justice filings, cash from the fund bought luxury real estate in New York, in London, in Beverly Hills, a stake in a music rights company, paintings by famous artists, a private jet, and a Hollywood production company co-founded by the Prime Minister's stepson. And that production company? It made The Wolf of Wall Street, a film about a financial con artist blowing his victims' money on yachts, mansions, and parties. Now, one thing needs to be crystal clear here. The artists who worked on that film, and the people who received gifts during all this, were never accused of any crime, and many of them voluntarily handed assets back to the authorities. 2014. A superyacht, nearly 100 meters long, gets delivered. Helicopter pad, movie theater, a full medical center on board, worth around $250 million. And they gave the boat a name, Equanimity. It means calm, composure, the ability to stay perfectly steady, no matter the pressure. That same year, back in Malaysia, the government rolls out a brand new consumption tax on ordinary people. Nobody, at the time, put those two things side by side. And then comes 2015, the year the whole thing cracks wide open. And here's what's remarkable. It didn't crack because of investigators. It cracked because of journalists. In February, a British reporter publishes the first documents on a personal blog. In July, the Wall Street Journal runs the story. Roughly $681 million had turned up in the personal accounts of the Prime Minister himself. So what do you think happened next? Not an investigation. The Attorney General running the inquiry gets replaced. His successor announces there was no wrongdoing. The Special Task Force? Dissolved. A financial newspaper? Suspended. A former employee who handed over documents gets arrested and thrown in jail overseas. And for the next 3 years, inside the country, the whole story is buried almost completely. But the outside world doesn't stop. 2016. The US Department of Justice files to seize the assets, and they call it the largest case in the entire history of their anti-corruption program. The figure they put on it, more than $4.5 billion, taken between 2009 and 2015. And the man with no job title? He vanishes from public view. February 2018. The superyacht, Equanimity, is seized off the coast of Bali. May 2018. Malaysia holds a general election. The coalition that had ruled for 61 years, ever since the day the country became independent, loses. Days later, police raid the apartments tied to the former Prime Minister's family. They haul out hundreds of luxury handbags, thousands of pieces of jewelry, and so much cash in so many different currencies that police had to borrow counting machines from a bank. The counting took days. That same year, Interpol issues a red notice for the man with no job title. He doesn't show up. And then, the bill comes due, 2020. Goldman Sachs admits wrongdoing and pays out billions in settlements with the US and Malaysian governments. Its Malaysian unit pleads guilty. 2 former bank executives are charged. One pleads guilty and cooperates. The other is sentenced to prison. August 2022. Malaysia's highest court throws out Najib Razak's final appeal. He starts serving 12 years. He becomes the first former Prime Minister of Malaysia to go to prison. December 2025. In the main case, he's handed another 15 years. The judge calls him the mastermind. So what about today? As of the middle of 2026, the Malaysian government says it's clawed back around 31 billion ringgit. And if nothing more comes back, the remaining net loss sits at around 20 billion ringgit. Now, that 20 billion didn't disappear off the face of the earth. It sits in the national debt, which means it sits in taxes, which means Malaysian kids being born today are going to pay off a piece of it. And the man with no job title is still out there, still free. His location has never been confirmed. And he still denies every single allegation. So let's look at this whole thing one last time. 17 years, 4 continents, a national fund with a full board of directors, with international auditors, with one of the biggest investment banks in the world handling its money, with financial regulators in multiple countries watching the whole time. Every one of those safeguards was there. Every single one of them followed its own procedure by the book, and not one of them stopped what happened. You want to know why? Because every control system ever built is designed to watch the people who have a job title. And this man? He didn't have one. He never needed to sneak around the system. He just quietly stood in the one spot the system was never looking.